a tough reality confronts the global economy, and especially the developing world. A series of harsh events and unprecedented macroeconomic policies are combining to throw development into crisis.
So that depreciates the value of money. We are going to have more conflict. We're going to have more inflation. Inflation causes domestic political conflict.
Look, I'm an optimist. You know, I said there's storm clouds, they're big storm clouds. It's a hurricane. Right now it's kind of sunny, things are doing fine. You know, everyone thinks the Fed can handle this. That hurricane is right out there down the road coming our way.
The efficiencies are no longer the most important things. Survival is the most important thing. The possibility of a war is an important thing.
Yesterday at Davos, Switzerland, the IMF stood up and said, the world economy is heading into the worst economic headwinds since World War II. The worst.
The wages are meager in comparison to the rising prices at the current time. The people are exhausted. There is a serious problem here, and this crisis is bringing Greek society to its knees.
There's no money for healthcare. There's no money for childcare. There's no money for climate mitigation. There's always money for war.
We need to fight against the increasing prices and the energy bills. Life in general is getting very unbearable.
When all you hear about in conversation is how am I going to pay the power company, how am I going to pay rent, how am I going to pay for food for my child, it is shocking what times we're living through now and what we're all talking about.
We're used to thinking that after an economic crisis, there is an economic upturn and that we need to adapt to new conditions and wait. Each of us hopes the crisis will not affect us or that we will be able to prepare for it. But this time, it will be different. There is no hiding from the impending collapse, even in the most developed country, even with enough money and high-paying jobs. It no longer matters whether you are a head of a company, a business owner, or a top expert. This crisis won't spare anyone. Why is there a global economic crisis today? And what awaits us in the future? Even the strongest economies in the world are experiencing an inflationary shock. The prices for all goods and services are rising sharply around the world. Inflation in the USA and Europe is now higher than in the last 40 years. What has caused such a sharp rise in inflation? During the pandemic, more than $15.5 trillion were printed in the USA and 2.5 trillion euros in Europe. This injection of money led to inflation, a reduction in the purchasing power of the population, and a price spike. In a market economy, the quantity of goods and services has to be balanced by the money supply. If there is more money, it simply devalues, and this leads to higher prices for all goods and services. In an attempt to contain inflation this year, national banks of different countries are raising interest rates. This means that in each country, the cost of all credit is becoming more expensive for both businesses and consumers. This situation is superimposed on a critical rise in global debt. In 2021, the world plunged into a debt crisis. World debt has increased by an unprecedented $77 trillion, and it amounts to 350% of global GDP. External debts of countries account for 1/3 of this debt. The main debt increase has taken place in the USA and China. In China, this has caused a mortgage crisis which has shaken the economy. 30% of mortgages are bad debts which will never be repaid. Chinese developers are demolishing entire blocks of new buildings because the utility cost of unsold flats is borne by the developers, which is unprofitable. How will rising debt and inflation affect economies of different countries? Because of rising interest rates, countries will have to pay higher interest rates on government loans. This means that our taxes, that is our money, will go not to improving our lives, social benefits, medicine, but to the International Monetary Fund. the World Bank, and other financial institutions from which our country has borrowed. The economic crisis continues to intensify because of the geopolitics that have triggered the energy crisis around the world. The world economy is going through a precipitous decline. How will this affect our lives? The economic crisis will soon lead the whole world into stagflation. What does it mean? Against the background of skyrocketing inflation, prices of goods and products will rise manifold, production will drop, jobs will be extremely difficult to find, and wages will shrink. Many goods and products will become scarce, and some of them will disappear altogether. This will lead to starvation, power shortages, and fuel shortages. Today, poverty is the norm of our world. According to World Bank statistics, almost half the world's population lives on less than $5.50 a day. That's $165 a month. With this amount, people must not only provide themselves with food, but also pay for utilities, rent, basic necessities, and medicines. Obviously, it is impossible for people to survive on this money. In developed countries, poverty is also a big problem. In the United States, 50 million people live in poverty. In Great Britain, 14.5 million. In Germany, 13.8 million people. In Japan, 20 million. The highest level of poverty in these countries is child poverty. In the US, 1 in 6 children live in a poor family. In the United Kingdom, 1 in 3. In Germany, 1 in 5. In Japan, 1 in 8 children. Poor families cannot provide their children neither with proper nutrition, nor medicine, nor education. The paradox is that in our consumer society, over 70% of people are living in poverty or at a survival level, while 1% of the population owns more capital than all the rest of people on the planet. And their capital continues to grow every minute. Even in times of crisis, the rich get richer and the poor gets poorer. The very model of the modern economy creates this inequality. In the current model, the wealth of some people is accumulated only at the expense of the impoverishment of others. The economy of the consumer society doesn't work any other way. This is the essence of the modern consumerist format of society. There is enormous amount of money and resources in the world, but also an enormous number of poor people. The coming economic crisis will push billions of people around the world below the poverty line. Insecurity, turmoil, and uncertainty will be increasing in every country. Uncontrollable public unrest will begin. So what is the real cause of this global economic collapse? The real reason is the current economic system. It doesn't just drive us into crises, it creates them. It creates inequality, poverty, inflation, and instability. Nowadays, the economic system is particularly destructive as our world enters a cycle of severe climate disasters. Climate losses are rising in every country, amounting to hundreds of billions of dollars. Climate disasters are increasing exponentially. Based on our mathematical model of climate change drawn up by the international team of scientists, by 2030, global GDP will not be able to cover all losses from destructive climate cataclysms. That means that in 6 to 7 years, there will be a total collapse of the world economy. Every one of us will lose everything. We'll no longer have electricity, heating, water, housing, food, or medicines. Climate disasters will simply put an end to our habitual life. Can we prevent this catastrophic situation? If we don't take drastic measures, it will only get worse. We can't find a solution in today's economic model. It's like patching up holes in a sinking ship. It will sink anyway. The economy is an artificial system created by people. We need to change the current economic system in order to survive. We need a new model that can create stability and security for every person on Earth, a model that serves all people, not just the 1%. To find a way out of this impending collapse, experts from different economic and related fields from all over the world have come together. A model of the creative society economy has been developed with another key principle in mind: to provide security and a high standard of living for every person on Earth. It is predictable, stable, unified, planned worldwide economy in which there is no inflation and prices are fixed. In such an economic model, there are no taxes for people, small or medium-sized businesses, and credits are given without interest. In this model, everyone will have a high universal basic income, free housing, free high-quality healthcare and education. The economy of the creative society will create a single high standard of living for every person, where everything works to meet the needs and comfort of all people. In order to implement this working model, we need to combine the efforts of specialists, business, and science. But first of all, we need to create a public demand for the creative society from the majority of people. Because changes of this scale can only be brought with a direct participation, desire, and consent of each and every person. It depends solely on us what kind of world we will live in tomorrow.